The Loess Plateau in China is a truly striking and remarkable place, also called the Huangtu Plateau. It kind of reminds me in some shots of some of the most barren and inhospitable places in the American Southwest. And I think you can sort of see what I mean, like the resemblance here a little bit. And it gets its English name of the Loess Plateau from what it's made up of mostly, which is loess, a type of sediment, a silty, fine, grainy substance, almost dust-like, a type of yellowish alluvium. And our plateau here in central China is the largest like it in the world. It covers over 154,000 square miles, and its layers of this fine silt material, this loess, measures between 165 to 260 feet thick, meaning that this thick, silty stuff can mask the actual terrain by a huge, huge amount. And yet, despite all these challenges, some beautiful wildlife does thrive here, and people have managed to make a home here too for well over 8,000 years. And so because of this rich history, and because of the thick layer of sediment everywhere, local villagers to the Loess Plateau, for a long time thought that the crumbling rock structures that littered the area nearby, they had to be remnants of the Great Wall. The Great Wall of China itself, and remnants of this Great Wall do go zigzagging throughout this whole area. So them thinking that made sense. What didn't make sense was the large amounts of jade that kept showing up around the area. And sometimes people would find just bits of jade rubble, but other times they would find blades and discs and scepters. Now the nearest natural source of jade to this spot on the Loess Plateau is well over 1,000 miles away. So how did it get there? Over time, people, especially people with an interest in history, started to get curious. Therefore, in 2010 and 2011, a team of Chinese archaeologists went out to the site to try to investigate these remnants of the Great Wall and figure out why there was all this jade around them. Turns out, it wasn't part of the Great Wall of China. And in fact, what laid underneath this spot in this strange, barren, almost alien landscape was the remnants of a 4,300-year-old city. And not just any city. This was a massive, ancient Neolithic urban structure, housing a huge step pyramid that was at least 230 feet high and spanned 59 acres at its base. And I know perhaps we're used to thinking of pyramids as being related to funerary rituals. But instead of being a tomb for the dead, this pyramid housed the elites of this society, built of rammed earth and stone. And this pyramid, this literally a citadel, was fortified with impressive defensive structures and decorated with beautiful, beautiful artwork. It's also a city that would bear testament to some of the more gruesome tendencies of our human past. But before we go any further, welcome. My name is Marie. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to talk to you guys today a little bit about the history of Shimao, which is just this amazing, amazing city, as I'm sure you're starting to pick up on, from ancient China. It's been an incredibly important archaeological site ever since it was discovered. And excavations there are still ongoing. And actually, like I said, since it's been in the news a lot recently, I'll warn you guys now, I'm not going to try to make a big story out of this one because my goodness, there's still so much going on and there's so much still to figure out, but it's so fascinating. I had to sit down and talk to you guys about it a little bit. So today's episode is just going to be kind of just a free-flowing bunch of cool stuff I found out about Shimao. Such an interesting place. It's so distinctive, and it's definitely a site that's going to reward us for paying attention to it as the years go on. I won't pretend like we'll be able to cover the full history of the site here today because we don't even know that yet, but my goodness, we can go through and find the best stuff, the most interesting bits, and it's time. Oh, it's time. Let's dive into the bits. So one thing I think that will help explain this place a lot, and the cool first thing I want to talk about is that even though this area in the Loess Plateau is very kind of barren today, back when this city was being founded 4,300 years ago, that was not necessarily the case. As I said, people have been living in this region for an extremely long time. And it is a region prone to flooding. It's a region prone to droughts as well. It is a region prone to tremendous windstorms. And on top of all this, like I said, it's got this base of loose, silty, sandy stuff. So very, very prone to soil erosion. But there was a time that this would have been a much richer, more forested, friendlier to habitation area. This hilly background that you're looking at behind these words now, this all used to be flat. This used to be a flat plain of trees and grass. And actually a nearby desert to our ancient city has recently undergone a very successful reforestation program. So we may someday see this area looking more like it should again. And so I think that will help keep this in context, because you can see we're looking at a huge, huge city. And that actually brings us to what I kind of want to talk about next, is just how impressive in size and scale this city built so many millennia ago was. Like, the entire size of the city as a whole spans over 1,000 acres, meaning it's about 25% bigger than the modern New York City Central Park. Also keep in mind that jade here that was found so far away, and that's the next point I want to bring up, is that this place was not just big, it was incredibly sophisticated. They must have had a trade network going to get that jade here, and you can see some of the culture they produced in some of that art that you're seeing now that I mentioned to you earlier. Some of these beautiful reliefs were also probably serving a spiritually protective purpose for the city, and a lot of the city, like I mentioned to you, is really defensively impressive as well. We're talking miles of both inner and outer perimeter walls. Walls alone that would have required so much stone to make, if you were to gather it all together, it could fit into 50 Olympic-sized swimming pools. And the population here was probably between 10,000 to 20,000 people. We can also see some of the defensive nature in how the elites lived. Like I said, the elite people lived at the top of this huge pyramid, which would have allowed them to see everything around. And this pyramid would have been visible from just everywhere. It wasn't just the living quarters, it was a statement, and it was a way to keep an eye on the territory. And we can also see some of this idea of protection and also spiritual protection in one of their more gruesome practices. While modern-day archaeologists were excavating under the city's eastern wall, they found 80 human skulls clustered into 6 different pits, and no body parts related to these skulls was ever found. It was just the skulls alone. There does seem to be some kind of significance in how the skulls were grouped together. For example, the 2 pits closest to the eastern wall's gate contained exactly 24 skulls each. Researchers believe this may have been a practice to give spiritual power and protection to the walls in the city when it was being founded. And there are certainly parallels to this in other cultures and societies, though that doesn't stop it from being painful and unfortunate. I always struggle when I talk about human sacrifice stuff on this channel, because on one hand I don't want to demonize the cultures that do it, but on the other I don't want to be dismissive of the pain that these practices can cause and did cause throughout history. It's kind of a fine line to walk. I will let you know that these skulls mostly seem to belong to young girls, and they're working on the theory right now that they were prisoners and captives that have been brought here for this purpose, perhaps belonging to a rival society. All of this was quite shocking to archaeologists, and Li Min, an archaeologist who has worked there extensively and is with the University of California, commented that the scale of ritual violence observed at Shimao was unprecedented in early China. Mass human sacrifice is instead what he calls a defining attribute of the Shang civilization, which is a different society in ancient China that occurred many centuries after this, and eventually later dynastic rulers in China stamped out the practice altogether. So seeing it here at this early date with this many dead was very startling, but I want to say again, and it's not me trying to make light of these young women's deaths in any way, they do think it was for a defensive spiritual purpose, and so much of the city seems to be built around this idea. For example, several stone blocks within the high walls of the terraces that make up the pyramid were carved with designs to make them look like enormous eyes looking down towards the east gate of the city. Wedged within the stones of the walls themselves were pieces of black and green jade, probably to add to that feeling of spiritual protectiveness, but honestly we don't still know a lot of that. And that sort of brings me to the last point I wanted to bring up, which is just, oh my goodness, we have so much left to figure out. Like I just told you some of the most interesting facts coming out of this site, but it's all kind of bits and pieces. We don't even know the name of this place, this beautiful, wonderful place that managed to flourish in the area that we least expected, even if it was a lot different back then. And even if they did have some darker parts of their culture, which again, I'm not trying to make light of or be dismissive of, the only way we can learn more about why they did these things is to learn more about them. This site and some others from ancient China actually have been in the news recently, and I'll definitely let you guys know when anything else cool comes up. But I am going to stop there for today. And guys, thank you so much for being here for the story of Shimao, this lost city. I'm picturing in my head like this city with almost like shimmery green walls, and oh my gosh, wait, am I thinking of the Wizard of Oz? Is this Oz? Oh my goodness, I don't know, but it's just, and they're saying too, like the whole outside of this giant step pyramid would have been covered with like this beautiful art, and I'm just, I'd love to see it. I hope we see more maybe reconstructions or recreations of what it might have looked like. At the same time too, I hope we learn more about the religious and spiritual practices, and like I said, I feel so bad when I think of those young ladies there. And it's such a complicated topic, but also a fascinating one, I think, and important to learn about. But that's the end of me. And as always, guys, please don't let my words be the last words you hear on ancient China. You'll find a full source list, like always, pinned to the top comment below, but don't stop there. May I say, your local library might have a wonderful book on ancient China. Or just a wonderful book on something else. Something totally cool and unique. I just walk in a bunch of times and I just let the feelings take me. I wander around. That's how you find the best stuff, is just looking. So just go have a looky-loo. Have a looky-loo at the library. You'll feel so much better, and it'll just be nice and cool. And when you're back from the library, if you enjoyed what you saw here today, then check out the rest of my channel, where you'll find lots more unusual and mysterious tales from our past. I post new Lost Bits episodes like this at least once a week, and I post longer deep dive videos once a month. So if that sounds like your thing, then I'd love to see more of you. But either way, thank you again so much for being here. Be safe, be happy, go with all my love. Until next time, goodbye.